भासते स्वयं लिख्यते कथम् हृदय कुहर मध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षात् आत्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वता मच्छता पवनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम् एहं मृण्मयवत् जडात्मकम् अहं भुक्तिर्न तस्यास्त्यतो नाहं तत्तद्भावशुक्तिसमये सिद्धात्मसद्भावतः ओहं भावयुतः कुतो वरधिया दृष्टात्मनिष्ठात्मना सोहं स्फूर्तितया अरुणाचल शिवः विभाति स्वयं सोहं स्फूर्तितया अरुणाचल शिवः पूर्णो विभाति स्वयं Namo Ramana. In this, the Thursday Satsangh from Ramanacentre Center for Learning. As is usual, we'll be reading from Guruvachaka Kovai, 2 verses selected. Each verse reading will be followed by a short meditation on its meaning, and that shall be followed by a self-inquiry practice session for 10 minutes. After these 2 segments of verse reading, meditation on meaning, and the practice of Atma-Ucharan are completed, there will be summing up remarks by our President, Dr. Sharadaka, and that shall be followed by the offering of Sri Ramanashtotram by Vaibhavji and Pratnama, and the floral offering shall be by Sri Manjunathji from here. We begin this evening satsang by taking the first verse, verse number 851 from Guruvachaka Kovai. This occurs in the segment Meditation on the Truth. The segment preceding this is Investigation into Truth, and the segment following this is experience of the truth. 851 occurs in the subsegment, the necessity of destroying the ego. The necessity of destroying the ego. There is a note by Muruganar Swamigal, and there is also a verse translated from Padamalai, again by Muruganar Swamigal. Verse 851, the necessity of destroying the ego. Instead of marring the fullness of being, that is God, who exists and shines without a second, by rising arrogantly as I, in opposition to him, a person should enter and subside in the heart his source. Instead of marring the fullness of being, that is God, who exists and shines without a second, by rising arrogantly as I, in opposition to him. Instead of that, a person should enter and subside in the heart his source. This truly is virtuous discipline that should be unfailingly observed by a person who wants to reach God's sanctum sanctorum, his consciousness presence, jnana sannidhi. This truly is the virtuous discipline that should be unfailingly observed by a person who wants to reach God's sanctum sanctorum, his consciousness presence, the jnana sannidhi. Instead of marring the fullness of being, that is God, who exists and shines without a second, by arrogantly raising as I in opposition to him. Instead of that, a person should enter and subside in the heart his source. This truly is the virtuous discipline that should be unfailingly observed by a person who wants to reach God's sanctum sanctorum, his consciousness presence, jnana sannidhi. The note by Muruganar Swamigal. In addition to one's bodily birth, one should be born again at one's source, Brahman, by destroying the ego through the inquiry, whence am I? In addition to one's bodily birth, one should be born again at one's source, Brahman, by destroying the ego through the inquiry, whence am I? Only such a twice born will be permitted to reach his extremely pure presence and see and touch his holy form. It has therefore been said that subsiding in the heart is the virtuous discipline. It should be known that the Atma Swarupa, the pure being, is God. Its consciousness grandeur is his presence, and the heart from where the ego rises and subsides is the sanctum sanctorum. Twice gone is also a synonym for Brahmins, Dvijan they say. Bhagavan, that is from Padamalai verse, Bhagavan. The heart is the holy sanctum sanctorum in which Padam, the self, resides. Those with deceptive minds cannot bow down and see it. Those with deceptive minds cannot bow down and see it. So this is the verse and the explanation by Muruganar Swamigal and the Padamalai verse under the subsegment, the necessity of destroying the ego. So it is that by rising arrogantly as I, there is this feeling that we are now separate from our source. And in that way, we are destroying the fullness of being that is God. In God, there is absolute fullness of being. There is, in His being, there is no other. Mayaham Nadayan, says Bhagavan in Aksharamanamale. The true self of Arunachala is the fullness of being. Soham Spurti Taya Arunachala Shiva Purno Vibhati Swayam. Koham Bhavayita Kuto Varadhiya Drishtvatma Drishtvatmana. When to find or to be in the presence of the self, the Sadbhava, when one inquires Koham, who am I, and takes the mind Drishtatma Nishtatmana, the outward turned attention of the mind is now turned towards the Atma, and in the relentless inquiry that is made, Soham Spurti Taya Arunachala Shiva, the answer will rise as I, the existence consciousness Arunachala, as the Purna Vastu, Purno Vibhati Swayam. Now, all the imaginations that we have, that we are separate from that, is only false, is only untrue. Because how can one mar the infinite? How can one mar the Purna Vastu? The Purna Vastu can never be marred. So, we fall into this imaginary land of strife and sorrows when we come out of that. But that is not the import of the verse here. The import of the verse is not our suffering, but the import of the verse is what we are doing to the Purnatva of the Supreme Being by acting as though we are separate from it. When Bhagavan narrates that story of surrender, where he says that there was this wayfarer who had this practice of worshipping Ganesha every day, and he had probably come to the end of his journey and he was left with nothing but a ball of jaggery, and that day he takes that jaggery itself to be Ganesha and does puja to his heart's content. And having completed the puja, now something is required for Naivedya and there is nothing around. So he pinches a little bit of the jaggery from the ball itself and offers it back to Ganesha. And Bhagavan says, this is the laughable matter of our surrender. What already belongs to the Purna Vastu, what already is the Purna Vastu, we imagine, we pinch out of it, and we imagine that is ours. The body and mind are ours. The possessions of ours are ours. And then we say, we have offered this, we have offered that, when it already belongs to the Purna Vastu. So the question of surrender itself is laughable, says Bhagavan, when one comes to the Purna Vastu. To imagine that you have taken something out of it and you own it and you are offering it back. That is laughable, says Bhagavan. But that too is not the perspective of this verse. The perspective of this verse is what we are doing or what we are imagining to be the nature of the Supreme Being. We mar the fullness of being of the Supreme Being. Instead of marring the fullness of being that is God, who exists and shines without a second, by arrogantly rising as I in opposition to Him, instead of that, the person should enter and subside in his heart the source. The ego should bow its head, knowing fully well that nothing is its, nothing belongs to it, and I am myself not separate from the source. It should bow its head and enter the sanctum sanctorum. That is what the Padamala verse says. The Padamala verse says, those who don't have this humility, that nothing belongs to me and nor am I apart from the Purna Vastu, they are not humble enough to enter the sanctum sanctorum. We find that in the temples, the sanctum sanctorum is a narrower rectangle than the entranceway leading up to it. And to go into that narrower rectangle, the entrance path, one has to necessarily bow oneself. One has to ask, from whence have I come? All this dance and all these credits and all this punya and papa I claim, all this education I claim, from where all these have come and from where I have come, that humbleness one should inquire this and subside in the heart. One should understand that one can never be apart from the Purna Vastu, which is shining as I. This truly is the virtuous discipline unfailingly observed by a person who wants to reach God's sanctum sanctorum. So we say so much virtues are there: love, being happy, humility, patience. All these are said to be great virtues. But the real virtue is to inquire from whence am I? Unfailingly, says Bhagavan. Without any let, one should inquire, what is the source of this I? From where do I claim that I know this and I do not know that? From where is the source of that I? Thus inquiring, one should subside and abide in the heart. This is the virtuous discipline that we are asked to unfailingly do. That is when we reach the sanctum sanctorum, the jnana sannidhi, the spurana of I. As we enter near that, the I is now merging into that spurana, and it is losing its separateness. That spurana is the summum bonum of all happiness. It is the fountainhead of bliss. Now, to enter that, one has to have this humility. One has to have this virtuous practice of being subservient to that and inquiring from whence have I arisen. When Grand Duff asks, how can I help my mother, who is no more, but who has been instrumental in me coming to this point in life? I want to help her. She must be in some loka, some world. So how do I help her? And Bhagavan says, to the one who has had the experience of the light of consciousness in the right side of his chest the previous day in Bhagavan's presence, to Grand Duff, Bhagavan says, if you are the body, then another body from which this body issues forth is called as the mother. But if you are the spirit, if you are the I thought, then that source, the Chinmayi, the self, the Purna Vastu, from which you have arisen, is the mother. To humbly inquire whence am I and abide in that Chinmayi, whom you have apparently marred her fullness by coming out as a separate entity, by going back and abiding in the Chinmayi, is the simultaneous welfare of your own as well as your mother, as well as everybody else. The simultaneous good for everyone is done when one enters the sanctum sanctorum of the sannidhi of this Purana, of the I. But for that, one has to necessarily practice this Atma Vicharam given by Bhagavan. With Bhagavan's immense grace, let us sit in practice of Atma Vicharam to enter that sanctum sanctorum which is ever present and which is the fullness of being, which we have apparently marred by coming out and feeling that the I thought is separate from its source. This is called as Dvijan, Bhagavan says in the Muruganar Swami says in the comments, one should be born again. In another context, another teacher, in another group of followers of Christianity, Jesus is asked, now I am 60 years old, how am I going to be born again? The reply is that the flesh is born out of flesh, water out of water, but spirit is born out of spirit. So go back into the spirit. That is being born again. And that concept Muruganar Swamigal uses here because it is present in our culture as Dvija. When we undergo the sacred thread ceremony, the Upanayanam, then we are said to have a second birth because the search for the source of the I through the mantra, Gayatri mantra, is started there. And the second birth, apart from the birth from the womb of the mother, it is said to happen at the time of Upanayanam. But really, Muruganar Swamigal says, really it happens only when the purpose of Gayatri Mantra to reach and abide in the self is fulfilled through self-inquiry, that one can call oneself as Dvijan or twice born, or as Lakshman Sharma ji says, one who is really born. The other is born to die. This is born with no more birth and death. With Bhagavan's immense grace, let us sit in practice for 10 minutes. The Atma Vicharam that we have been blessed with. Fatima, you have the time for us? Namo Ramana. We go on to the reading of the second verse from Guruvachka Koi. It is verse number 927. 927. This is in the segment Experience of the Truth. It is under the subsegment Omniscience. Omniscience is the subsegment, verse number 927. In those minds that have not subsided, in those minds that have not subsided, all the afflictions arising from their inner delusion have already accumulated through their limited knowledge. If they gain omniscience, the already existing darkness of delusion will only become more dense, but there will be no benefit whatsoever to the jivas. 927. In those minds that have not subsided, all the afflictions arising from their inner delusion have already accumulated through their limited knowledge. If they gain omniscience, the already existing darkness of delusion will only become more dense, but there will be no benefit whatsoever to the jivas. So first of all, the omniscience of God is for the benefit of the jivas. Now, Bhagavan would say elsewhere that when asked by a lady that is it not good that the illiterate sage should gain some knowledge, the intention being that she feels that there will be some work if they can communicate intelligently with the denizens of the world. So she would ask, is it not wise for the illiterate sage to learn something, to get some knowledge? Bhagavan would say that the ones who are ignorant are merely ignorant, but those who have learned and accumulated knowledge are having learned ignorance, because the knowledge, objective knowledge, is part and parcel of ignorance, is as good as ignorance, is only the other side of the coin, because he says in the talk, he says, because both are ignorant. Both the ignorant man is also ignorant. The ignorant person who has learned a lot, he is also ignorant. Not only that, he has accumulated learned ignorance, because that knowledge is part and parcel of ignorance. The jnani has already attained the goal. He knows what is true knowledge. Therefore, he is beyond knowledge and ignorance. Whereas both the ignorant one who hasn't learned much in the world, who is in one sense far better off and is capable of surrender, and the one who has accumulated a lot of knowledge from the objective world and is now adding on to it, both of them are ignorant of the true aim, says the jnani. The true aim being the Purana, the limitless self of I, the true knowledge, the infinite expanse of consciousness, and not the infinite addition of discrete data, one over another. Now, here in this verse, Bhagavan makes it clear that if those people who think that learning various branches of knowledge, objective knowledge, philosophy, science, this, that, and other things, and have added on and have given great value, and such ones, how they will talk, it's really we can very easily see that just like those who are interested in, let's say, gold, we'll talk of the value of gold and the number of tolas and the number of sovereigns of gold was given in marriage and all that. Those who are interested in land will be talking about the value of land. Those who are interested in knowledge will be talking highly of those who can talk in subtle tones and who can talk in various subtleties of intellect. To Bhagavan, all those nuances of the learning that have been accumulated and added on are only bundles and bundles of ignorance, added one on top of the other. And in this verse he says, if they are given omniscience, the omniscience being that they can know whatever is going to happen and whatever has happened and whatever is happening, suppose they are given such knowledge, they will think that all that really means to know that so-and-so will be born at this time, so-and-so will get this at this time, so-and-so will die at this time. They will feel that is the knowledge and they will make a hue and cry about this. Whereas when Shastri Mama, the astrologer from Tiruvannamalai, who was a real expert in astrology, like who had accumulated that knowledge that he could see the face of a person and predict. He was an expert in casting the horoscopes. Not only that, he was also expert in just seeing. In fact, one incident is narrated that a person from a high-ranking official, mostly from police department, has come for some problem solution at his house. While Shastri Mama is doing puja, he is seated outside. And Shastri Mama is going to take some more time, so he calls his better half and tells her, that gentleman is waiting for me, I am going to take some more time for the puja. Go and tell him that his ring, seeking which he has come here, has actually fallen in his own garden, and that he should not blame the ones working in his home. It is at the root of this tree. And that is the prediction, or that is the knowledge that he had gained, for which only science, philosophy, everything is there, because we are eager to know what is going to happen to us. So he was already an expert at that. And once this story is narrated in Ramananjali by Kameshwarji, but I am not exactly telling the story as it is there. So those who want, you can refer to Ramananjali and Kameshwarji's article. Then he casts the horoscope of his young son, the newborn son, and he finds that the son is going to pass away intestate, as in his teens or in his very young age he is going to pass away, and he is not going to be the legitimate experiencer or enjoyer of the properties of the father. So he is deeply disturbed. The great astrologer, the great knowledge person, is deeply disturbed and comes to Bhagavan and asks, is there a prayaschitta? And Bhagavan says, no. So, and he says, what is the relief? What the mukti is the only relief that I find now. Will astrology not give me mukti? Bhagavan says, no. Only self-inquiry and surrender can give. And from that point, the one who has come to the apex of that field understands it is total ignorance. To know when one will be born, when he will acquire some property, when he will die, all this is ignorance. The true knowledge is that we are the self, that we have no birth and we have no death. We are one with the Supreme. we have not really separated from the Supreme. The Supreme is always telling, I am everything, I am formless, I am everything, I am formless, I am. It is saying, instead of merging with that, if we separate ourselves from that, the ones who are separated from the source, they feel that that knowledge is important and keep saying that is the omniscience is related to that out of ignorance. and their ignorance grows dense if more knowledge is given to them. Whereas true knowledge is to come out of this cycle of knowledge and ignorance, of birth and death, and abide in the self, which Bhagavan truly gives. The illiterate sage gives this true knowledge to that lady, saying that the illiterate sage, whom you call as illiterate, has already gained the purpose of life, the true knowledge. Whereas the one who is adding knowledge upon knowledge about the field of birth and death is only adding to his ignorance. To gain this true knowledge, to abide in this self, Bhagavan has given us the Brahmastra of Atma Vicharam. Whenever a thought rises, I know or I don't know, one should not follow either the field of knowledge or try to remove the ignorance of some other field. But one should ask, for whom is this knowledge? For whom is this ignorance? And take that ego to the source of true knowledge, true existence, true happiness, the self. With Bhagavan's immense grace, who helps us to move away from this darkness, the dense darkness of the duality of knowledge and ignorance, with his immense grace, let us sit in practice of Atma Vicharam for 10 minutes. Revathi, you'll set the time for us. Namo Ramana. I request our President, Dr. Sharda, to give us the summing up remarks. Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana. By Bhagavan's immense grace, we have been able to listen to his teachings in Guru Vachaka Kovai, to meditate on them along with Nandakumarji, and to also practice the self-inquiry. And today, Bhagavan's first verse to us reminded me of one of the verses in Muruganar's Ramana Sannidhi Murai, which talks of the self having absolutely no arrogance. The ego is the one which has arrogance. Muruganar Swami says, Yan param endre serukadu ennulle venkatavan தான் கடவுளாக தலைப்பட்டு ஒளிர்வதனால். Because the self, Venkata, Ramana, the self, shines as the supreme without claiming to be so, without saying I am the supreme. Yan param endre serukadu, without any arrogance. Whereas the ego has arrogance, and that arrogance only gets multiplied, says Bhagavan, if it acquires knowledge, if it acquires learning, all kinds of learning. It only feels, oh, I'm a better person, I know so much, I know all this. Even though it may not have pride on regarding the learning, just the awareness, I know this. Somebody else doesn't know, I know. And that becomes an accretion or an addition or the fattening of the ego. Similarly, actually, Bhagavan says that if there is a magician, the magician knows he is cheating people, whereas the one who has siddhis cheats himself as well. So this learning, Bhagavan says, is of really no use at all. Of course, Kunju Swami at one point wanted to go and learn some Vedantam. Then Bhagavan said, why all this? First Vedantam, then Siddhantam, then something else. Is there an end to all this? What is the purpose? The purpose is only to abide in the self. Bhagavan has narrated a story in this regard of the Roma Maharshi. Roma Maharshi was a sage who had such a long span of life that when the 4 yugas, it is said, consisting of billions, thousands of billions of years, when they come to an end, one hair from his body will fall. And it is said that only when all the hair from his body falls, his lifespan comes to a close. And he had a desire to study the Vedas. And he began to study the Vedas in depth. And he was studying and studying and studying. Being a Maharishi, he recognized that his lifespan was coming to a close, and he prayed to God for an extension of his lifespan because he had not yet finished studying even one of the Vedas. Then God said, all right, so be it. And he continued to study. And he continued, and a second lifespan was coming to an end. And again he prayed, and again he was granted one more equal extension. And then the third lifespan, when it was coming near and the end, he thought, I must pray to God again for one more extension. I'm nowhere completing the study of the Vedas. Each of the areas of learning are so vast, so endless, like the universe. So how much can the learning be? And it is endless. And what has it added to his anubhava, to anybody's anubhava? This God decided to reveal to him out of grace. And that night, the Maharshi had a great dream, a beautiful dream. The Roma Maharshi had a beautiful dream. What was that dream? Simple but great. The dream was that there were 4 huge hills of sugar, and there was a monstrous ant, very, very, very big ant, which was quickly taking the grains of sugar from one of the mountains and placing it near its home or in its home. It was scurrying here, then there, from the home to the hill, from the hill of sugar back to the home, then from the home back to the hill of sugar. Whole day long, this activity it was performing. This was the dream. And Rama Maharshi understood the truth. He understood that this study of the Vedas, which he was undertaking, was merely what Nandakumarji described as addition of disparate pieces of information. What did it amount to? It amounted merely to shifting the hill of sugar from where it was to its own home. That is, if there is something written in a book, from that book we shift that information into our head, into our mind. That is all we mean when we say we know something. 2 plus 2 is 4. It's there in the mathematics book. It comes into our head. Anything, any piece of learning which is written in the book, which is spoken of by somebody, which is intuited by someone else, the great scriptures, all that, if we are only learning it and not experiencing it. The Maharshi understood, Rama Maharshi understood that if that ant were to have eaten, tasted some of the sugar, would it not be far more worthwhile than simply shifting the mountain of sugar to its own home? What was the purpose of doing so? And he recognized that abidance in the self, experience of the self, is alone meaningful. So also for us, we are daily gathering so much of knowledge. The ego keeps getting fattened in the thought that I know all this, I have done all this, I know this, I know this, I know this. Every thought it says, I know this. It recognizes the thought and feels very thrilled that it knows the thought. But Nirmal Swami says, no, there is no use. You have to find the true source. In that song, Yan Param in Tiruvampavai, he says, யானோடு தான் என்னும் இருவோரும் அன்றிக்கே நான் எனும் சொற்பொருளை நாடி இதயத்தலத்து. Searching for the true meaning, the true import of the word I. What does this word I mean? Searching for its true meaning where? In the heart source, tracing it back there. What happened, says Muruganath Swami? Nan keda nangadinaya velorepar. And then the eye gets destroyed. Muruganath Swami has recorded that which Bhagavan is saying, telling us over here the importance of destroying the ego. When one does inquiry, the ego with all its clothes, all its guises, all its acquisitions, all its accretions completely disappears, is dissolved into the source. And that is Bhagavan's grace, and that is the grace which is also leading us to itself every moment, and of course very especially when the teachings are shared with us and they become clear to us within our mind. The import of the teaching. It is not that we are acquiring further learning, further words. Oh, this is written in Guruvachaka Kovai, this is written somewhere else. No, the purpose is to abide. And that's why Bhagavan blesses us with practice as well. Practice, which is the adhara for us to continue the practice at all times by that very grace, until the one who is practicing is completely dissolved in the source. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana.
Namo Ramana. May I request Vaibhavji and Pratnama to start the chanting of Ashtotram?
Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana.
Bharatvaj Vishwanath Virachitam Sri Ramana Ashtottara Shatanamavalihi Apada Satchit Sukhavari Rashe Yasyormi Matram Bhuvanam Samastam Guhahitam Tam Ramanam Gaviram Chinta Vihinam Hridi Chintayami Om Mahasena Om Shena Jataya Namaha Om Siddhi Ramanaya Namaha Om Gurave Namaha Om Akhanda Samvidakaraya Namaha Om Manojase Namaha Om Karanodbhavaya Namaha Om Jagadhitaavataraya Namaha Om Sri Bhuminathasthalostitaya Namaha Om Parashara Kulottamsaya Namaha Om Sundaraya Tapaffalaya Namaha Om Kamaniya Sucharitraya Namaha Om Sahayamba Sahayavate Namaha Om Shonachala Maholina Manasaya Namaha Om Swarnahastakaya Namaha Om Srimadvadashanta Mahastale Lapta Vidyodayaya Namaha Om Mahashakti Nipatena Prabhuddhaya Namaha Om Paramartha Vide Namaha Om Tivraya Namaha Om Pitrupadandeshine Namaha Om Indumaulina Pitrumate Namaha Om Pituradeshakashornashailam Praptaya Namaha Om Tapomayaya Namaha Om Udasinaya Namaha Om Mahayogine Namaha Om Mahutsahaya Namaha Om Kushagradiye Namaha Om Shanta Sankalpa Sambrahmaya Namaha Om Susandrashe Namaha Om Savitre Namaha Om Sthiraya Namaha Om Tapakshapita Sarvangaya Namaha Om Kullambuja Vilochanaya Namaha Om Chandrika Sitahasha Shri Manditanana Mandalaya Namaha Om Jyutavatyam Samasinaya Namaha Om Jurnitakhila Vibramaya Namaha Om Veda Vedanta Tattvajnaya Namaha Om Chinmudrine Namaha Om Trigunatikaya Namaha Om Virupaksha Guhavasaya Namaha Om Virajatachalakృతये Namaha Om Uddiktanayanaya Namaha Om Purnaya Namaha Om Rachitachala Namaha Om Gambhiraya Namaha Om Paramacharyaya Namaha Om Suprasannaya Namaha Om Abhayapradaya Namaha Om Dakshinasya Nibhaya Namaha Om Dhiraya Namaha Om Dakshinabhimukhaya Namaha Om Swaraje Namaha Om Maharshaye Namaha Om Bhagavate Namaha Om Divyaya Namaha Om Bhuma Vidya Visharadaya Namaha Om Vimalaya Namaha Om Virgadarshine Namaha Om Attaya Namaha Om मार्गप्रदर्शकाय नमः। ॐ समदृशे नमः। ॐ सत्यदृशे नमः। ॐ सत्याय नमः। ॐ प्रशान्ताय नमः। ॐ अमितविक्रमाय नमः। ॐ सुकुमाराय नमः। ॐ सदानन्दाय नमः। ॐ मृदुभाषिणे नमः। ॐ दयाणवाय नमः। ॐ श्रीशोणाचलऋद्भूतस्कन्दाश्रमनिकेतनाय नमः। ॐ सत्कर्षदोपदेष्ट्रे नमः। ॐ सद्भक्तवृन्दपरिवृताय नमः। ॐ गणेशमुनिवृन्देन सेवितामृतसरोरुहाय नमः। ॐ गीतोपदेशसारादिग्रन्थसञ्चिन्न संशयाय नमः। ॐ वर्णाश्रममतातीताय नमः। ॐ रसज्ञाय नमः। ॐ सौम्याय नमः। ॐ आत्मवते नमः। ॐ सर्वावनिपतस्थानाम् आराध्याय नमः। ॐ सर्वसद्गुणिने नमः। ॐ आत्मारामाय नमः। ॐ महाभागाय नमः। ॐ मातृमुक्तिविधायकाय नमः। ॐ विनताय नमः। ॐ विनुताय नमः। ॐ विप्राय नमः। ॐ मुनीन्द्राय नमः। ॐ पावकोज्ज्वलाय नमः। ॐ दर्शनादरसंहारिणे नमः। ॐ मौनेन स्वात्मबोधकाय नमः। ॐ मरिचान्तिरसानिध्याय नमः। ॐ स्मरणाद्बन्धमोचकाय नमः। ॐ अन्तस्तिमिरचण्डांशवे नमः। ॐ संसाराणवतारकाय नमः। ॐ शोणादृशस्तुतिद्रष्टे नमः। ॐ महाविद्याप्रकाशकाय नमः। ॐ अवच्युतनिजप्रज्ञाय नमः। ॐ नैसर्गिकमहातपसे नमः। ॐ कमण्डलुधराय नमः। ॐ शूद्रकौपीनवसनाय नमः। ॐ मुखाय नमः। ॐ दण्डपाणये नमः। ॐ कृपापूर्णाय नमः। ॐ भवरोगविषग्वराय नमः। ॐ स्कन्दाय नमः। ॐ देवतमाय नमः। ॐ अमर्त्याय नमः। ॐ सेनान्ये नमः। ॐ पुरुषोत्तमाय नमः। ॐ श्रीरमण भगवते नमः। श्रीरमण स्तोत्रशतनामपूजां समर्पयामि। यस्थानो अरुणाचलस्य पदयोः स्मृत्याजलिं प्राप्यत दिव्यानुग्रहसुप्रवाहविवशस्तादात्म्यभावं गतः निर्दिष्टस्वकीयनित्यतपसा लोकान् पुनासेकराट् तस्मै श्रीरमणाय ते नमः लोकोत्तरज्योतिषे। ॐ नमो भगवते श्रीरमणाय।
नमो 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 रमण सदाशिवप्रभावरण नमो महर्षि नमो महर्षि दर्शन सुख मंगल मुख सकल जीवहित सम्मुख ब्रह्म संगिये सदा तुष्ट सदा हृष्ट सदा शिवानंद पुष्ट परम महर्षि ब्रह्मनिष्ठ समदर्शि नमो 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 रमण सदाशिव प्रभावरण नमो महर्षि नमो महर्षि ನಮ್ಮ ಮನವದೊಂದು ಕಾಡು ನೀನರಿತಿಹೆ ಅದರ ಜಾಡು ಹಿತವನರಿತು ನೀಡುತ್ತೆಮ್ಮ ಕೊರೆಯ ತಣಿಸಲೈ ಬೇಡಲೆಂದು ಬಂದ ನಾವು ನೋಡಿಯೇ ತಣಿವೆವಯ್ಯ ಮೋಡಿಗಾರನೇ ಹಿತವ ನುಡಿದು ಪೊರೆ ನಮ್ಮನು ಬ್ರಹ್ಮ ಸಂಘಿಯೇ नमो 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 रमण सदाशिवप्रभावरण नमो महर्षि नमो महर्षि। बोलो भगवान श्री रमण महर्षि की जय।
ನಮೋ ರಮಣ ಅಕ್ಕ, ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮೋ ರಮಣ.